Here's everything you need to know about the first stages of reading.
These early skills, like phonemic awareness and understanding letter sounds, lay the foundation for reading success. When children learn to read and manipulate sounds, they're building the skills needed to decode words, which is the basis of reading. Starting with these fundamentals helps them to feel confident as they progress to blending sounds and eventually reading full words and sentences on their own. After the session, I hope that you'll have an understanding of phonological and phonemic awareness, letter sounds, and basic word building and blending with CVC words. So the first thing we're going to talk about is phonological awareness. And this really is the foundation of reading. This comes before any formal learning how to read, before children open books, before children start to associate letters with sounds. And all of this can happen with their eyes closed. So that's the way I like to remember it. When your child has their eyes closed, they can hear the world around them, they can hear the sentences that we're saying. And phonological awareness is when they start to develop that understanding that sentences can be broken down into words, and then words can be broken down into smaller chunks. So the way I like to think about it is that phonological awareness is this umbrella, and it really covers the foundation of all of the skills that need to be in place before your child starts to learn how to read. So things like identifying syllables, rhyme, and alliteration are all things that come first. And after that, we start to look at something called phonemic awareness. Now that phonemic links to phonemes, and phonemes are the smallest units of sound that make up a language. And in English, there are 44 of those sounds. So when your child has a really good phonological awareness, they're able to identify syllables, rhyme, and alliteration, that's when they're ready to start developing their phonemic awareness, when they can start to find the initial sound in a word, the sound at the end of a word, and using that understanding to segment, so to sound out, and then also to blend and begin to read. So if we have a look at this word, cat, when your child has a good phonemic awareness, they will be able to understand that there are different letters and different sounds that make up that word. So for example, cat, you can ask your child, what sound can you hear at the beginning of the word? And you can really emphasize that when you say it, k, cat, and get them to see that k is that initial sound. Again, this is something that they're doing all with listening at this stage. They wouldn't be seeing this as a written word. You could then ask them, can they hear the last sound, or the end sound of that word, cat? The last sound is t. So when they have a good phonemic awareness, they're able to start to pick out the individual sounds in words. So here's a few simple games and ideas that you can play at home with them to develop their phonological and phonemic awareness. So one of the games you could play is clapping the syllables of familiar words like their name. So if their name is Joshua, you would clap out Joshua. You could do fun things like the food that they're eating, pizza, ice cream, chocolate. So lots of fun things to do. And again, you don't need any resources ready. They can just clap with their hands. Another game that you could play is I Spy, but there is a slight twist to playing this. So normally we might say, I spy with my little eye something beginning with G. If you're playing this with an early reader, I would recommend changing that to I spy something beginning with G, so using the sound, not the letter name. You could do this in different ways. So you could tell them the sound that they need to try and find, or if you have a pack of phonics cards at home, you could give them a card. So there's a picture here, you could give them G and see if they can go and find something beginning with that sound. You could do that around the house. You might say to them, go and find something beginning with D, and then you could get them to take the card to that object. So you might take it to the door. Another activity you could try, if they're getting quite good with identifying that initial sound and starting to feel more confident, is you could find an object or get them to find one, and you could put out 2 different sound cards, just like I've done there with the k and the l. So I found a leaf, and you could get your child to point or to put a peg on the sound that that object begins with. So leaf begins with l, so your child will then point to l. And you could make that a bit trickier and put out a few different sound cards, but starting off with 2 is a really great place. And then the next thing you could do is play some oral blending games. Now these are really great for practicing blending, especially before your child starts that process to read words. If they can just do that orally, if you sound it out and they blend the word. So I'll give you an example. So you might say to your child, and when they're getting ready for bed or when they're getting ready for school, so you can really do this in any point in their routine. And you might say to them, have you brushed your teeth? Have you got your socks? So getting them to really start to develop that understanding that each word can be broken down into different sounds. And they're practicing that skill of putting all of those sounds together to make a word, even before they're starting to learn how to read. And blending is something that children often find a little bit difficult when they learn how to read. So by playing these simple games, it will really set them up for success when that time comes. So just a little recap so far. Phonological awareness is that foundation of our house of learning how to read. That's the understanding that starts to develop even with your eyes closed, everything you can hear around you. Your child will then start to develop a phonemic awareness where they start to break down words into sounds. So listening out for that initial sound, listening out for that sound at the end. And then the next stage is where the teaching of phonics comes in. When your child starts to understand that each sound can be represented by a letter. So one of the things I mentioned when we were talking about the I Spy game is by using letter sounds and not names. And what I mean by that is when your child starts school, if your child knows the letter sounds, it will prepare them for learning how to read. The letter names at this stage are not very helpful. Your child will learn these more naturally as they get older, but at this stage, learning the letter names is much more useful. So for example, the letter name is A, but the sound is A. Okay, so learning the letter sounds is much more useful than the letter names. Now, if your child knows their ABC song and they can sing you the alphabet, please don't worry. That's okay. You haven't done anything wrong, but just so that you are aware at this stage, learning the letter sounds will help them much more with their reading. So I'll show you an example here. So you can see that the word cat has been written all in capital letters. So I'm going to use the letter names to try and read the word cat. C-A-T. Now hopefully you can hear that knowing the letter names isn't really helpful in this case. It doesn't help us with trying to read this word. But if we use the letter sounds, k, a, t, cat, we can use those letter sounds to help us to read the word. Now, a lot of parents ask me, how do I say the sounds? Perhaps you were taught how to read in a different way, or you're just not sure. I'm going to be posting some videos and some guides on how to say the phonic sound. So I just want to talk to you about why these are so important and how these can help in the early stages of reading with learning how to blend. So a CVC word follows the structure of consonant, vowel, consonant. So vowels are the letters A, E, I, O, U, and consonants are all the other ones. Now, Y is a bit of an exception, but in a basic structure of a CVC word, we don't really use the Y, so I'm not going to focus on that today. So if we have a look at this word bat, you can see it follows that CVC structure. We've got consonant, vowel, and consonant. Now, when your child is first learning how to read, they will learn how to identify just the single letter sounds by looking at a flashcard, and it will just be that single sound that's isolated with nothing else. But when they start to learn how to read, CVC words can be a really helpful way of teaching them that they can put those individual letter sounds together and blend them to read the word. Now, if they've been doing things like oral blending, like we discussed earlier in one of those simple games you can try, this will come a lot more naturally to them. So if they are having a look at this word, b-at, bat, they're starting to see how those sounds can come together to read one word. Now, what you can do is you can substitute just one of these sounds, and I'm going to change that initial sound, the sound at the beginning, and this is a really great way to boost your child's confidence, especially in the early stages of reading. So if I keep the a and the t, I'm just going to change that initial sound, at, hat. So you can see how the middle and the end sounds have stayed the same, but I've just substituted that initial sound at the beginning. We can repeat that again, at, mat. Okay, so you can have a go at that with your child, just replacing that initial sound at the beginning. Now, some of the children that I work with, when they first start their lessons with me, they find reading 3-letter CVC words really difficult. So what you can do in that case is to work with 2-letter words. Every child's learning how to read journey is different. So for some children, they might be ready to start with CVC words. Some children might need a little bit more time. So in this case, you can just use 2-letter words that have a vowel and a consonant. So you could start with it. You can then change that initial sound to at, at. So here's a couple of simple games that you can try at home to practice blending with CVC words. So one of the things you could do is use some post-it notes. Now these can be different colors if you'd like to highlight the consonant, vowel, consonant, but you don't necessarily need to. You could use the same colors. And what you could do is choose a middle sound and an end sound, and then you could have a range of sounds at the beginning that your child could substitute. You could do something similar with some Lego cubes or maths cubes if you have them at home, and just use a whiteboard pen for this so that afterwards you can just rub them off and they'll be good as new. So what I've done here is I've used different colors for the vowel and the consonant, which is particularly helpful if your child is going to be the one building the words. You could teach them that it needs to be green, pink, green. Okay, and then they'll be able to build their own words and read them. If your child is then at the point where they're starting to write and form their letters, you could then get them to write them out as well.
That's everything you need to know about the first stages of reading. Subscribe for more like this.